I've been wanting to do this video for a while, and I keep being so inspired that I'll write and research to find more and more and more and more and more. But sadly, then I realized that anyone with a brain, other countries, the whole damn fucking world fully understands that even at a basic micro level, that black people have never been made whole, given reparations or restitution. Restitution is restoring something that was lost and stolen, basically making shit right. So this is one huge reason why people like the Queen, we are going to talk about today. That's what makes these people so important, inspirational, and aspirational. So it was really important to me to paint a really visual, descriptive picture of what her life was like. So I asked ChatGPT to enter this chat and tell me what life would typically be like for a black woman in the South in the 1950s and 60s. So here's what ChatGPT said. In the 1960s American South, a black woman lived at the intersection of racism and sexism, experiencing both the harsh realities of Jim Crow segregation and the gender norms that limited women's autonomy. How she was treated and regarded depended on region, class, and community, but several patterns were widespread and deeply rooted in the social structure of the time. Below is a clear, accurate picture of what life was generally like under Jim Crow. There was enforced inferiority and daily humiliations. Black women were legally segregated from white society and expected to act in their place, meaning public spaces were segregated so they could not use the same bathrooms or restaurants or libraries or schools as whites. There was a mandatory deference, expected to call white people Mr. and Miss, while they were often called by their first names or girl or worse. Any perceived disrespect towards a white person could provoke harassment, violence, or job loss. They had to deal with dangerous racial power dynamics and exposure to violence. Black women were vulnerable to sexual violence by white men, usually with no legal recourse, physical intimidation from the police, vigilante violence, especially in rural or small town areas. Unsurprisingly, the legal system overwhelmingly protected white perpetrators, while punishing black victims sounds like today. Black women were essential to the economy, but they were treated with profound inequality. Long hours, low pay, it was the norm. Employers often treated domestic workers as inferior or subhuman, which led us to the placekeeping rules such as eating separate meals or entering through back doors. Black women had to deal with exploitation. Exploitation is when white employers frequently controlled transportation, hours, and wages, and engaged in coercive or abusive behavior. So exploitation is when you are working for someone and that you don't get anything from it, but they benefit. Black women also had to navigate the white patriarchal norms, which tried to confine them to service roles. The black community, black women were often pillars of families, the church, and activism despite limited resources. Black women are full of strength and resilience, and black women were respected as caregivers, breadwinners, church leaders, cultural tradition keepers, but wider society often portrayed black women in racist stereotypes such as the mammy figure, which is an asexual caregiver, a Jezebel, which is a hypersexualized caregiver, and a Sapphire, which is an angry and aggressive black woman. And apparently these stereotypes help keep the tradition of treating black women like shit. And despite facing discrimination from both white society and sometimes male leaders from within the civil rights movement, black women were central for the fight for justice. They served as organizers, strategists, freedom riders, marchers, teachers, vote registration workers, but they were often denied equal recognition or leadership titles. But that's not much different from today. They faced barriers to schooling. Black schools were underfunded with old textbooks, larger class sizes, poor facilities, dirty, nasty, old, dusty, dingy, limited legal recourse. Before the Civil Rights Act in 1964 and the Voting Rights Act in 1965, black women had limited access to voting. They could be fired for protesting. They virtually had no protection from racial discrimination at all. Despite oppression, black communities built strong networks of churches, sororities, and women's clubs, neighborhood mutual aid groups, schools, and cultural institutions. These were often sources of dignity, leadership, and solidarity, and I can see that because my grandparents showed that. That's what they showed to me. A black woman in the 1960s American South was often marginalized, controlled, and endangered by racist laws and customs, yet she was also a central force in her community and also the civil rights movement, demonstrating extraordinary resilience and agency despite structural oppression. Those stereotypes justified mistreatment and discrimination. Despite facing discrimination from both white society and sometimes male leaders within the movement, black women were central to the fight for justice, and I think that we've always been. And without further ado, Fannie Lou Hamer. She's such an inspiration to me. It's unfortunate that I learned about her so late in life, but a blessing that I learned about her at all. Learning about this amazingly strong woman really just gave me the final push to act on the idea and goal and plan of Mental Nomad. Just hearing about her, it was like that final push. Oh, so please subscribe. My mission is to teach and share the knowledge that I have, things that interest me, things I think that we should all know. I hope that you'll like and subscribe and go on this journey with me. My goal is to create a community of learning, love, and compassion and understanding that breeds compassion that breeds understanding. That's why I feel it's so important to spread knowledge. It's especially important to me to spread knowledge about Black American history. And like I always say, Black history is American history. And while this administration is really going after and whitewashing history and erasing the atrocities in museums and schools that were done to Black Americans in the name of American exceptionalism per Donald Trump. I am a Black woman that came from a Black woman. I hold esteem in being book smart. But the funny thing is, and it's not funny, is if you just took an honest minute, take an honest look around, and do some real thinking about the history of the United States, you'll see that Black people have never had justice. The laws and practices that were put into place by people who didn't want Black Americans to have true equality, I've noticed lately that a lot of people are realizing that a lot of this cruel mayhem that we're dealing with now is because the treasonous, dirty Southerners were not held responsible or punished for going against the country. The Southern states were readmitted into the Union and their citizenship was restored. President Johnson issued a general amnesty to most former Confederates, including pardons for Confederate soldiers, which ended the possibility of a large-scale treason trial. In my opinion, this is an example of how actual justice would have helped the country. And it also further shows the way that the machine of legislation and white people looking the other way help to maintain the status quo of white supremacy. That's why, again, it is so important to know about your government and how it works. If you think that Trump wanted you to have or gave you a stimulus check, you need to be here. You need to learn and share. Don't be ignorant on purpose. That shit is gross. And while this administration is really going after and whitewashing history and erasing the atrocities in museums and schools that were done to Black Americans here in America in the name of American exceptionalism, I am a Black woman that came from a Black woman. I hold esteem in being book smart. But the funny thing is, if you just took an honest minute, an honest look around, and do some real thinking about the history of the United States, you'll see that Black people have never had justice. The laws and practices were put into place by people who didn't want Black Americans to have true equality. I've noticed lately that a lot of people are realizing that a lot of this cruel mayhem that we're going through right now is because the treasonous, dirty Southerners weren't held responsible or punished for going against the country. The Southern states were readmitted into the Union and their citizenship was restored. President Johnson issued a general amnesty to most former Confederates, including pardons for Confederate soldiers, which ended the possibility of a large-scale treason trial. In my opinion, this is another example of how actual justice would have helped the country. And it also further shows the way that the machine of legislation and white people looking the other way to help to maintain the status quo of white supremacy. That's why it is so important to know about your government and how it works. If you think that Trump gave you a check during COVID or he wanted you to have one, you need to be here to learn and share. Don't be ignorant on purpose. That's gross. Also, Google checking Nancy. That's who gave you that check. So I just want to educate everybody. We need to know about our ancestors and the people that came before us and how they resisted, so we know that we can be and accomplish anything. Hopefully, seeing the power in our ancestors will make you see the power in you. That's why it's important to know about Fannie. Fannie Lou Hamer is best known for her powerful activism and advocacy for voting rights and racial justice. Notably, her testimony at the 1964 Democratic National Convention, her co-founding of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, and her iconic statement, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." She was a prominent figure in the civil rights movements, a grassroots organizer, and an advocate for economic empowerment and reproductive rights for Black communities. All good things. Hamer's most significant work was registering Black voters in Mississippi, which was a highly dangerous and discriminatory environment. She was fired from her plantation for her efforts to register and vote, but this only strengthened her resolve. She also worked to create economic opportunities for Black families through initiatives like the Freedom Farm Co-op. The Freedom Farm Co-op was an agricultural cooperative in Sunflower County, Mississippi, founded by American civil rights activist Fannie Lou Hamer in 1967 as a rural economic development and political organizing project. The co-op sought to uplift Black families through food provisions such as vegetable gardens and pig raising, and through community support such as housing development and education. By providing food and financial services that the U.S. government systemically denied Black communities as a means of oppression, sounds like what's happening now, the co-op allowed Black families to be self-sufficient. With reliable food and housing, the community was able to more freely participate in politics and protests. This co-op is a foundation for modern food security and food justice movements. And then there is the 1964 Democratic National Convention and her forceful testimony at the convention. She spoke about the violent suppression of black voters and brought national attention to the systemic racism and injustice in Mississippi. She demanded that the all-white Mississippi Democratic delegates be replaced by the racially integrated MFDP delegates. The Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which Hamer co-founded, to challenge the legitimacy of the state's all-white segregationist delegation for the Democratic Party. Fannie is obviously something serious. Fannie also raised awareness about the harmful medical practice of forced sterilization of black women and coined the term Mississippi appendectomy to describe it. So again, the term Mississippi appendectomy describes the forced, non-consensual sterilization of black women, often through unnecessary hysterectomies. Hamer coined this term after she herself was sterilized without her consent in 1961 while hospitalized for a uterine tumor, a practice so widespread, again, it held that nickname. She used her own experience to raise awareness about the forced sterilization and the broader eugenics movement targeting poor black women. And I cannot let the word eugenics just be referenced and not defined, because I've got a video coming about that too. In simple terms, eugenics is the discredited and immoral theory and movement aimed at improving the human species through selective breeding. This typically involved encouraging reproduction among people believed to have desirable traits and preventing it, often through forced sterilization or other coercive means, among those deemed undesirable or unfit, like the black woman. So back to the forced sterilization, aka the Mississippi appendectomy. Again, unfortunately, Fannie had a personal experience with this when she was sterilized herself while there to be treated for something else. This experience became a focal point for her advocacy against forced sterilization. There has been a lot of practicing on black bodies that was not approved. That's why a lot of black people are afraid of going to the doctor in medicine. So back to Fannie. She was known for her singing, her plain-spoken, powerful delivery, and her ability to sing spirituals became a hallmark of her activism, galvanizing and exciting and inspiring audiences and conveying the deep-seated injustice and resilience of black communities. Fannie's personal life and experiences informed her political work later in life. She was born into a sharecropping family on October 6, 1917. She was the youngest of 20 children and the granddaughter of enslaved people. Fannie survived a bout with polio as a child, which left her with a permanent limp. Fannie's death was directly linked to the systemic medical mistreatment of black people and long-term health consequences from a violent 1963 arrest and the broader issues of unequal access to medical care that disproportionately affected and affects black women, and yes, it still does. Her death from breast cancer and heart failure in 1977 was exacerbated by the lasting physical trauma from the beating and her struggle with later stage diagnosis of breast cancer due to delayed medical treatment. So about this beating. In June 1963, Fannie and other activists were brutally beaten by police and jailers after trying to register people to vote in Mississippi. Fannie suffered permanent injuries to her eyes, legs, and kidneys, which she never fully recovered from this beating. The trauma was a significant factor in her decline in health and death. Unsurprisingly, there was no justice, and all-white jury acquitted the police officers who beat her. And like many black women in the South, Hamer likely received a delayed diagnosis and late treatment for her breast cancer, which contributed to its progression. A 1977 Mississippi Public Broadcasting article notes that black women in the Delta had a lower incidence of breast cancer but a higher mortality rate due to late diagnosis and care. Her death highlights the lasting and lethal impact of state-sanctioned violence and discrimination against black people, which was a core issue that she fought her entire life. Learning about Fannie made me love Fannie, and I hope it made you feel the same. I hope to be as great as she one day. She left behind a powerful legacy as a very important figure in the civil rights movement by advocating for voting rights and giving a voice to marginalized communities. So, we are going to close with her power. The most powerful way I can think to do this is with her powerful, powerful speech at the 1964 Democratic National Convention. When Fannie Lou Hamer testified before the Credentials Committee of the 1964 Democratic National Convention, she told the world about the torture and abuse she faced in her attempt to register to vote. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote that her testimony educated a nation and brought the political powers to their knees in repentance for the convention, voted never again to see the delegation that was racially segregated. When you see all of these students coming here to help America to be a real democracy and make democracy a reality in the state of Mississippi, can't you see the fulfilling of God's word? He said, "A city that's set on a hill cannot be hid. Let your light so shine that men would see your good works and glorify the Father, which is in heaven. Blessed are, yea, when men shall revile you and shall persecute you and shall set almighty evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets which were before you." That's why I tell you tonight that you have a responsibility, and if you plan to walk in Christ's footsteps and keep his commandments, you are willing to launch out into the deep and go to the courthouse, not come here tonight to see what I look like, but to do something about the system here. We are not fighting against these people because we hate them, but we are fighting these people. We're fighting these people because we love them, and we're the only thing can save them now. We are fighting to save these people from their hate and from all the things that would be so bad against them. We want to see them the right way. Every night of my life that I lay down before I go to sleep, I pray for these people that despitefully use me. And Christ said, "The meek shall inherit the earth." And he said before 1/10 of his word would fail, heaven and earth would pass away, but his word would stand forever. And I believe tonight that one day in Mississippi, if I have to die for this, fine. We shall overcome. We shall overcome means something to me tonight. We shall overcome mean as much to me tonight as Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Because if grace hath saved a wretch like me, then we shall overcome. Because he said, "Seek and ye shall find. Knock and the door will be opened. Ask and it shall be given." It was a long time, but now we see, we can discern the new day. And one day, the little Negro children, the little Negro boys and the little Negro girls won't be afraid to walk down the street because of so much hate that would make a police jump on a kid. And one day, by standing up, going to the courthouse to try to register and vote, we can get people that's concerned about us. Because anytime you see a Negro policeman, now you can rest assured he's a Tom. Because if he wasn't a Tom, he wouldn't be elected by the people. Not just a handful of folk. And he'll get out on the street and beat your brains out. You'll be afraid to go around the corner and arrest a white man. We want people over us that's concerned about the people, because we are human beings. Regardless of how they have abused us for all these years, we always cared what was going on. We have prayed and we have hoped for God to bring about a change. And now the time have come for people to stand up. And there's something real peculiar, but still is great. There used to be a time when you would hit a Negro, a white man would hit a Negro, the others would go and hide. But there's a new day now. When you hit a Negro, you likely to see 1,000 there. Because God care and we care. And we can no longer ignore the fact that we cannot sit down and wait for things to change. Because as long as they can keep their feet on our neck, they will always do it. But it's time for us to stand up and be women and men. Because actually, I'm tired of being called auntie. I wonder in life what actually they would allow for me to be a woman. Because until I was 36, I was a girl. Girl this, girl that. And now I'm 46 and it's auntie. But I want you to know tonight, I don't have one white niece or nephew. And if you don't want to call me Mrs. Hamer, just call me plain Fannie. Because I'm not your aunt. You know, people have said for years and years the Negroes can't do anything. That's the report that they was sending out about the people in Mississippi. The Negroes are ignorant. But just who's acting stupid now? I heard a preacher say one night that people could look at the cloud and say it was going to rain, and it would rain. And still now, they can't discern the signs of the time. We can see the signs, people. The signs of the time. And the time now is to stand up. Stand up for your constitutional rights. And one day, if we keep on standing up, we won't have to take this literacy test to copy a section of the Constitution of Mississippi that we had never seen and interpret it too. When if we had the same test, he couldn't. One day we won't have to do all of this. We'll keep right on walking. And we'll keep right on talking. And we'll keep right on marching. And when your ministers say, well, it's all right to stand up, but don't march. I don't like bringing politics into the church. And when he says this, it makes me sick because he's telling a big lie. Because every dollar bill got a politician on it and the preacher love it. And if this man don't choose to be a shepherd, he can be a sheep and follow the shepherd. You know, actually, I used to have so much respect for teachers and preachers. I would be nervous when I'd be around them. But since I found out that the scariest two things we got in Mississippi, how can you actually trust a man and have respect for him? He'll tell you to trust God, but he doesn't trust himself. We want leaders in our community, and what people will say, well, if we can get rid of Fannie Lou, we can get rid of the trouble. But what they don't know, freedom is like an eating cancer. If you kill me, it will break out all over the place. We want ours, and we want ours now. I question sometime, actually, has any of these people that hate so, which is the white, read anything about the Constitution? 1870, the 15th Amendment was added onto the Constitution of the United States that gave every man a chance to vote for what he thinks to be the right way. And now, this is 64, and they're still trying to keep us away from the ballot. But we are determined today, we are determined that one day we'll have the power of the ballot. And the sooner you go to the courthouse, the sooner we'll have it. It's one thing I don't want you to say tonight after I finish. And it won't be long. I don't want to hear you say, honey, I'm behind you. Well, move. I don't want you back there. Because you could be 200 miles behind. I want you to say, I'm with you. And we'll go up this freedom road together. Before I leave you, I would like to quote from an old hymn my mother used to sing. Should earth against my soul engage, and fiery darts be hurled, when I can smile at Satan's rage and face this frowning world. Thank you. Bye.